Well, the hardest thing about this way of working is essentially doing it within the confines and the structures that our organizations place on us. One of the things that we've talked about a lot here is the nature of the project. The project is the basic sort of unit of analysis that all of us use. And the project has a certain structure. It has a time frame. It has a way in which you set out objectives in the early stages and you evaluate projects at the end stage. It has a certain set of contractual agreements and relationships between the grantee and the grantor, the borrower and the lender, both sides of the relationship. That can really put constraints on your ability to be flexible, because once those things get started, it becomes very difficult to change.
Donors don't like ambiguity. You know, they want to know, we're going to put in this much money, we're going to achieve this result, and we're going to have kind of these benchmarks along the way to get there. And we want to know exactly how, and you need to log frame it out, how you're going to get each of these things happening.
Uncertainty is the hardest thing about this kind of work in general, and particularly in a crisis. The thing you need to remember is to stay focused on the end result, not the particular system or individual reform you're working on. So the Emergency Operations Centre in Sierra Leone, which is the structure that is managing the Ebola response for the government, it's had different people in it, it's had different structures. The military are now involved, it is now jointly led by the UK military. So it's changing all the time, but the thing that we need to keep focused on is, even with all that uncertainty, how well is it working at getting people to hospital, at managing the response? So stay focused on the end goal and kind of ride with all the uncertainty.
There are many hard things. One, you have to be comfortable with uncertainty and complexity. Right? So that's one of the difficulties. Makes people very nervous when they don't know what's going to happen.
I think the hardest thing is probably emotional. That people join NGOs, and I think join development organisations generally wanting to do good, thinking that there's a way to do good, and thinking that someone's going to tell them how to do it, and then they're going to be given a plan, and then they're going to implement the plan. And to say to them, actually, it's all really messy and uncertain and ambiguous, and you'll never be completely sure if you're right or not. And you have to live with that and sort of navigate through this sea of uncertainty. I think people find that very hard.
So this is a very personal thing. I think the hardest thing for me is learning to be patient. I have found the way that we do development, and I don't just mean in the World Bank, I've worked for foundations, for the UN system, for civil society, and I think those of us that went into development out of commitment and passion are all aware that the model has been broken and needs changing for quite a while. So I find it very urgent that we change the way that we think and do development. And I find it quite frustrating that I have to slow down and keep bringing people along with me. Of course, that's important because I said process is important. But the hardest thing for me, as somebody who feels passionate about this and has a sense of urgency, is to keep checking myself to slow down and to wait for others to join and make sure that a coalition of people is going forward and not just one individual.